Hi, doodads and dudettes. It's Patrick from 8bitdoodads.com. And this is a kind of unique video. It's off our normal vintage world. But I thought it'd be something interesting to do. We have here a Mac Pro back from the 2010. So it's, old. It's 14 years old, but it's not as old as some of our Apple IIs and our Commodores or what have you. But I want to talk a little bit about this because this came in from Treasure Coast Electronics Recycling as one of our ewaste products. And I want to talk about what I'm doing with it and, how you can repurpose older computers. So stay tuned for more.
Say, kids, what time is it?
It's 8-bit doodads time!
Now, this particular unit is a Mac Pro 5.1. There are, well, actually, there's a whole bunch of them now. The original Mac Pro 1, what they called the 1, which was in this case, was actually a Macintosh Power PC unit. And I have a couple of those with both the standard Power PC G5 processor, and I have one that sort of works that has a dual G5 with water cooling. It was the first time and the only time that Apple ever did water cooling. And I have some of the Mac Pro 2 and 3 series and whatever, which have, ever since they moved beyond the Power C, these came with 1 or 2 Xeon processors from Intel. And, with 2 processors, you could get 2, 4, 8 cores total, or if you had I think the largest one was 6 core processors, and you had 2 of them, you'd have 12 cores, and in the most latest generation, those 12 core processors with hyper-threading would give you 24 cores. So they were quite capable. This is the end of this all aluminum Mac Pro line. You see me babying it and everything. This was the end, and I had been looking for a 5.1 for a very long time. So I was happy to see this came into e-waste and that we could rescue it. I'm going to open it up here. One of the things that's common in all of these machines, all the Intel machines, they had 4 3.5-inch drive bays. You can mount a 3.5-inch drive in here, and there's a SATA port down in there. And Apple was actually, they've always been great in their design. And so you can put 4 hard drive bays in here, which, if you know anything about recent Macs, they don't have room for hard drives at all. They also had PCIe slots in these machines. So you can see a graphic card in here. They didn't have built-in graphics. That was in here, and you could put additional cards in here. And I'm going to put in, there you can see right here, I put in a USB 3 card, which USB 3 didn't exist when these first came out. The reason I'm bringing this out, and we're going to, on this video we're going to do, has to do with what's down here. If you notice, you see this is the heat sink, and there's another heat sink. These are the 2 processors. There's banks of memory here for one processor, and below this is the banks of memory for the other processor. And in fact, if we push on these 2 slots, one of the things Apple did was they put their processors on a tray. So now you can see it, the memory for each processor and the heat sinks that are on here, and it's on a tray. So this isn't the quote motherboard. This is just the CPU tray. The motherboard is down below, and that's what the graphics card is plugged into, and the USB 3 card's plugged into, and our CPU card plugs into that slot. The reason I'm bringing this out is this has two slower 4-core Xeon processors in it. And what I want to do is I want to take off these heat sinks and replace them with 6-core faster processors. They would be the fastest processors that could exist in this machine at the time. Part of the reason I'm doing this is I actually happen to do, again through eWaste, had taken apart a Dell server that had those higher end processors in it. So I had access to the processors. So why not go ahead and upgrade this? And the upgrade of going from the dual 4-core lower clock cycle processors to dual 6-core higher clock cycle processors will boost us from a, what they call I'm going to say a CPU score of like 8,000 to 14,000. So it's a big boost. So I'm trying to do this as make a much better performing Mac Pro of something that was 12 years old, but would perform in almost today's standards. Now, in order to do this upgrade, we need a couple things. I'll give you the simple. One is we need thermal paste, because when we put new processors down, we have to put paste on them for the heat sinks to set on and to help actually transfer the heat. And I have here the two Xeon processors that I pulled from that machine, that are compatible, that are the fastest processors this particular CPU card stack would use. One of the things you'll notice is some memory already in here. This memory actually came out of the same machine that these chips came out of, and they're 16 gigabyte memory sticks. And you notice I've put 3 in here. There are actually slots for 4. Interestingly enough, even though they have 4 slots in here, this is 3-channel memory, so it performs better with only 3 sticks as opposed to if you put 4 sticks in. You get more memory, but you lose a little bit of performance. But given that these are 16 gig sticks, this is already giving us 92, 96 gigs of memory. It's 48 plus 48, so that's 96 of memory. It's plenty of memory. We don't need to go the extra route, and I'd rather do it for speed. The other interesting, because it's Apple, you notice there's these little holes in here? That's how the heat sinks are screwed onto the CPU board. And so you need to have an Apple-only tool, which is this device, which is a hex screwdriver, but with a very long stem on it that gets you down into that hole, and now it's locked in. So I can unscrew these heat sinks, and once I unscrew the heat sinks, I can get to the CPUs that are currently installed and pull them off and be able to put our new CPUs on there. I'm going to go ahead and take these off. And one of the things they tell you to do is you should do it at the same rate. In other words, don't unscrew one screw, then unscrew another screw or what have you, is that you should move between them all. So now that I got it locked in the head, I'm going to turn this one whole turn, then go into the next one till I get it in there, and I'll turn that one whole turn to go into the next one, and I'll turn that one whole turn, and we'll keep doing this until we've unscrewed this heat sink. So you'll see I'll go back and forth between all the screws. Now, I'm going to keep doing this, but I will fast forward through this video so you don't have to see all this. Okay, you can see I've removed it. You'll see the old thermal paste here on the bottom and the thermal paste on that CPU. I will get out a good old paper towel. And remove the thermal paste from that. Also remove the thermal paste from here. And you can see that's a very nice copper heatsink. Now, the reason we were doing it in that order of moving around the screws is you want to relieve the pressure off clamping down on that sort of evenly. That's even more important when we're going the other direction. So when we go to replace the CPU, we're going to want to twist them down in that cross pattern at an even rate to make sure we're setting the heat sink and moving out the paste on the processor at a consistent rate. I'm now going to do the same thing with the other processor. And by the way, I should mention, you can see this is it's an aluminum shell. It's got copper piping, and there are fans. I don't know if you can see that. There's a fan built into the processor that's powered and blowing air across these fins to keep this cool. So this is actually a very high-end heat sink and cooling to dissipate heat away from this system. So we'll start to loosen this one up. And it probably doesn't matter so much how quickly you loosen it up, as long as you're doing it in relatively uneven order. There we go. When we get to tightening it back down again, you want to be a little bit more precise. And as you see me turning it here, it's not doing anything. I'm looking for it to get into the slot. And right now I can tell I'm a little bit unbalanced in the screws because the heat sink's leaning one way a little bit. The truth is, I'm not sure. You don't know when you've actually released it. You could be just spinning the screws because the paste could be sticking it down. So I'm going to try to pull it up. And no, it's not totally loose. So screws are still holding. Now I think it's loose. There we go. And again, we'll clean the paste off of it. And that's a very solid copper heat sink, which this was as well, which is really great for heat dissipation. So we've removed the two heat sinks. Our next step is to remove the CPUs, and there's a couple triggers there on the CPU. Okay, so now it's time to swap the CPUs out. And so what we want to do, I think the first thing I want to do is I want to confirm that these are the CPUs I want. And yes, these are X5658s. And let me make sure I have a matched pair. X5658s. These are 6-core, up to 3.4 gigahertz CPUs, and the ones that are in here are E5620s. So I'm going to do a quick search, and I'm going to tell you what their relative performance is, just to confirm that we're putting the right CPUs in the right places. Okay, it was a good thing I checked, and then double checked and triple checked. So I actually went and looked these up, and as you can tell with my glasses, I'm blind as a bat at some things, and I was reading it as 5658 when they're 5660s, which are compatible with this motherboard. But I want to make this my super hot rod machine, and I have a pair of 5670s, excuse me. They're a little bit faster than these, not by a lot. These are not the fastest you could have in here. These are 6-core processors. They're the same speed or faster than the processors that are in here. Oh, these are faster than the processors in there. These are the same speed as the processors that are in here, but they're 6-core versus the 4 cores. There are even faster processors that you can get than these two, but they run hotter. These run 95 watts each. The fastest ones would run 130 watts each, which, if you know anything about these older Macs, and if you have some of the cinema displays or whatever, they produce a lot of heat. So I'm actually okay to go with a little bit slower and a whole lot less heat. The other thing you're noticing is, you might have noticed in the video, I don't know if you can see it, there's a lot, well, there you might be able to see that as I clean it off. There's a lot of dust on here, so I'm going to clean that off before I swap out the processors. And once I swap them out, we'll proceed with putting the heat paste back on and putting the heat sinks back on. Now, you might have noticed I didn't do a deep clean. I used a air blower and a brush to get rid of a lot of the dust. I'm not trying to wash the motherboard or what have you. Now, to replace processors, we simply lift up the cover, and I will take out one of them, which has the notch and peg. And I'll use that to, hold on. There's a sticker here that wasn't on the, there you go. On the Mac version of the processor, I think this came off of the Dell server. I want to make sure it's seated correctly. I think it is. And then we'll take off this one. And again, the notch is that way. There we go. So the processors are laid in. And then I bought a new box of thermal paste, and I'm using the Nocturnal NTH1 thermal paste, which is one of the higher end ones. This usually comes with cleaning pad. Oh, this one didn't. They usually come with cleaning pads and the paste or what have you. These were already cleaned. So, and for this processor, they recommend the 5-dot method. I'll clean that off and close this back up because we use that again. And so you have the dots. That one has a little bit more than this one does. I think we'll be fine. You can see this is the power connector for the fan. So we can line up the power supply. So, there we go. And that's lined up. And then we take our tool. And here we're going to be more careful. One, that's a half turn, turn. I'm going to go to the opposite end. Find the screw, half turn, turn. Find the screw, half turn, turn. Find the screw, half turn, turn. 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 As you can see, this is painstaking. Half turn, turn. Half turn, turn. And you just keep doing this because you want to put constant pressure on the heatsink as it's going down. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Now I'm going to try to orient them all the same way. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 2. 2. As you can see, I'm moving around the holes in a random pattern. I'm trying to keep the pressure going down at a constant rate. And see, that one's locked. That one's locked. That one's locked. That one's locked. So now this sink is solid in there. And now we'll repeat the process with the other. Using the power connector for the fan that's in this, there's a power connector on there, is a good way to make sure you got it all aligned. So I think I'm getting near the end. That's done. I think that's done. That's done. That's done. And that's done. Okay. So we now have the power supplies, the heat sinks back in. We have our processors out. And so the big test will be, can we put this back in the machine and does it power up? Okay, we're now going to reinsert the tray back into our machine. Just slides down in. And that locks it in place. We'll put our lid back on. And that's our completed upgrade of the Mac Pro 5.1. You can see on the bottom of it, we have a RX 580 video card. We've added USB 3 ports and all the other standard ports. I'm now going to plug it in and see if it boots and is still working and with the upgraded processors. Okay, we're back, and as you can see, we have our Mac desktop up. I have it plugged into a video capture device onto my PC. And as you can see, I'm going to go up here to, I've used the right mouse. Go up here to About This Apple. And we see our Mac Pro 5.1 with our two 2.93 gigahertz processors, 6 cores. So we've upped the cores and we've upped the speed from what it was previously at. This machine also includes a Radeon RX 580, which is one of the preferred cards for people restoring these machines and upgrading them because it works with so many of the operating systems. On this particular machine, I'm running OpenCore Legacy Patcher on the 5.1, which is how we have Ventura running. You can see that down here. And if you're running while my window's in the center of the screen, I'm actually, one of the things I suggest is to block your serial number, because apparently people steal serial numbers to make Hackintoshes and other things. Also, I'll note in the machine, it has 92 gigs of memory, or 96 gigs of memory. The reason for this is while there are 4 memory slots per processor, so a total of 8, I have 16 gig RAM sticks in here, but I only put 3 in each bank because they're 3-channel memory. So if you go to the 4th one, you can add more memory. I could add another 32, getting us to 128, but you actually lose some performance from that. And 96 gigs of memory is plenty, so I figured that's not a problem, and rather have a little bit more performance. As you can tell, we have our standard apps working. It's a fully running machine, so we sort of maxed this out. I have put this in with Ventura. The next thing will be to give Sonoma a try. I happen to actually have a couple of these 5.1s and a couple 4.1s, so I might try to put different operating systems on those, but I have to find more of this type of video card. I will say installing Ventura on here with OpenCore was relatively pain-free. I was surprised. I had been wanting to do this for a long time, and I had held off, and it was really painless. That's probably because, they've continued to move that project along. I'm going to do another video in this series down the road, actually showing that installation process, how you go about doing that. Maybe we'll do that for upgrading this machine or another machine to Sonoma. If you like this video, be sure to click the little like button, follow us on 8bitdoodads.com, and look for some of our other more 8-bit vintage gear videos on Apple IIs and Commodores and Ataris and what have you. But I thought this was a great little project to just put on the channel, as a lot of people are doing this kind of work. Thanks.